When Captain Elena Vance stepped off the transport plane into the brutal Alaskan cold at 1600 hours, she had no idea that in 12 hours, a presidential escort would arrive looking for her while she meditated in minus 15-degree weather. But she also had no doubt she would survive whatever the night brought. My name is Elena Vance. Call sign, silence. I'm 34 years old, and I've been dead 3 times according to official records. Each time, I've walked out of situations that killed everyone else. The remote SEAL training facility in Alaska was exactly what I expected. Brutal, isolated, a place where only the hardest warriors came to test themselves against nature and their own limits. I was only supposed to be here for 24 hours, a layover between classified operations. My orders were sealed, my identity protected by security protocols so high that even the base commander wouldn't have full access to my file. I wore basic combat utilities with no visible identification, no rank insignia, no unit patches, no name tape, just plain uniform and boots with a small duffel containing everything I needed. The cold hit me like a physical force as I walked from the plane toward the main buildings, minus 15 Celsius, and that was before accounting for wind chill. Most people would be shivering within minutes. I barely noticed it. I had been trained in Arctic survival, had operated in conditions that made this look comfortable. The cold was just another variable to manage. The temporary billeting office was in a prefab building near the center of the compound. I pushed through the door into blessed warmth and approached the desk. A young petty officer looked up from his computer. "Help you? I need temporary quarters for 24 hours. I'm in transit to a classified location. Name and orders?" I handed him my documentation, all of it sealed in classified envelopes with codes that he couldn't break. He looked at the papers with confusion. "Ma'am, I can't read any of this. It's all classified above my clearance level. Contact your commanding officer. He'll have the authorization codes." The petty officer picked up a phone and had a brief, hushed conversation. After a moment, he hung up. "Commander says to assign you to transient quarters, Building 12. But ma'am, I should warn you." He was interrupted by the door slamming open. 6 men entered, all wearing SEAL tridents, all carrying the swagger of elite operators who owned this base. They were covered in mud and sweat from whatever training evolution they had just completed. The leader was a staff sergeant whose name tape read Davis. He was tall, heavily muscled, with the kind of face that had seen combat and enjoyed it. His eyes landed on me and narrowed. "Who's this?" he asked the petty officer, jerking his thumb in my direction. "Transient personnel, sir. Just here for 24 hours. Davis walked over and looked me up and down with obvious contempt. "Let me guess. Admin clerk? Medical? Personnel? Lost your way to the Coast Guard?" His friends laughed. "I'm waiting for transport," I said calmly. "I just need temporary quarters." "Transport to where?" "That's classified." Davis smirked. "Everything's classified these days, probably heading to some cushy assignment in Germany or Italy. Play soldier in an office while real warriors do the actual work." I said nothing, my face expressionless. One of his friends, whose name tape read Mitchell, spoke up. "Sarge, Building 12 is full. We've got extra guys for the Arctic warfare course." Davis turned back to me. "Hear that? Base is full, no room for visitors. Especially visitors who don't look like they could handle a single pull-up." "I have authorization from Central Command," I said evenly. "I'm sure we can find accommodations." "I don't care who authorized what," Davis said, stepping closer. "This is SEAL territory. We don't roll out the red carpet for people just passing through, especially not for women who think they belong here." The other SEALs moved closer, forming a semicircle around me. Intimidation tactics, trying to make me feel small and threatened. It didn't work. "Here's how this works," Davis continued. "Women who come to this base have to prove they deserve a roof over their heads. Until then, they sleep outside. Builds character. Teaches you what real warriors endure. You're ordering me to sleep outside, in minus 15-degree weather? Consider it a learning opportunity. If you can handle one night in the cold, maybe you'll appreciate what we go through every day." Mitchell pulled a ratty old sleeping bag from a storage locker and tossed it at my feet. "Good luck with the bears, Princess. They're real active this time of year." The SEALs laughed. The petty officer behind the desk looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. He wasn't going to challenge 6 SEAL operators for some transient nobody. I looked at Davis directly. "And if I refuse, then I report you for insubordination and failure to adapt to base protocols. Your transport gets delayed while we sort it out. Could be days, could be weeks." He smiled. "Your choice. Sleep outside for one night or get tangled up in bureaucracy." I calculated quickly. I could pull rank if I revealed my actual status. Could contact my command and have them straighten this out. Could make these men regret their decision in a dozen different ways, but that would compromise operational security, would draw attention to my presence, would delay my mission, and more importantly, it would be admitting that I needed help dealing with basic disrespect. I picked up the sleeping bag. Where should I set up? Davis looked surprised that I had agreed so easily. 200 meters north of the compound. Stay away from the buildings. Don't want you disturbing real operators. Understood. I turned and walked out, carrying the sleeping bag and my duffel. Behind me, I heard them laughing. Mitchell's voice carried through the door. $5 says she's begging to come inside. Within 2 hours. 10 says she doesn't make it to midnight. Another voice added. I'm betting she calls for her commanding officer before sunset, Davis said. Women always do. I walked through the compound toward the northern perimeter. Marines and sailors I'd passed looked at me with curiosity and sympathy. A woman carrying a sleeping bag toward the wilderness in Arctic conditions. They knew what was happening, but no one intervened. This was a SEAL training facility. What the SEALs said went. I reached a clearing 200 meters from the main buildings. The wind was stronger here, unblocked by structures. The temperature felt like it dropped another 5 degrees. I surveyed the area with a professional eye. Rocky ground with patches of snow, some low shrubs, a tree line another 100 meters away where the bears Davis had mentioned might actually be a concern. This would do. I set down my duffel and began preparing my campsite with the efficiency born from years of field experience. The sleeping bag they had given me was garbage. Barely rated for freezing temperatures, let alone the -15 we were experiencing. The zipper was broken and the insulation was compressed and ineffective. They had given me this intentionally, hoping I would fail. From my duffel, I pulled out my actual cold weather gear. I had been on my way to an operation in a mountainous region, so I was equipped properly. But I wasn't going to use it. Not yet. I wanted to see how this played out. I laid out the inadequate sleeping bag, positioned myself where I would be visible from the base buildings, and sat down in a meditation position. Then I closed my eyes and began the breathing exercises I had learned during SEER training, slowing my heart rate, reducing my body's heat loss, entering a state of controlled awareness where the cold became just another sensation to observe rather than suffer. This was what they didn't understand, what civilians and even most military personnel never learned. The body can endure almost anything if the mind is properly trained. Cold is just information. Pain is just a signal. Discomfort is just a temporary state. I had survived 11 days alone in the mountains of Afghanistan after an ambush that killed my entire team. 11 days with minimal supplies, 2 gunshot wounds, and temperatures that dropped below 0 every night. I had walked out of situations that officially never happened, had endured interrogations that left scars I still carried, had operated in conditions that would break most people within hours. The Alaskan cold was nothing. This was practically a vacation. Through my closed eyes, I was aware of my surroundings. I could hear voices from the base, could sense the wind patterns, could track the small animals moving through the brush nearby. This was my element, not despite the hardship, but because of it. Back at the base, lights came on in the windows. I could imagine the SEALs gathering to watch, probably making more bets about when I would crack. Hours passed. The sun set and the temperature dropped further. -20 now, maybe colder with the wind. I didn't move, didn't shiver, didn't show any sign of distress. I was silence. I had earned that call sign by operating in conditions where any sound meant death, by becoming one with environments that would kill normal people. This was just another exercise in control. Around 2200 hours, I heard footsteps approaching, heavy boots crunching through snow. I opened my eyes. Mitchell stood there holding a flashlight, looking confused. "You're still out here?" "Yes, aren't you cold?" "I'm managing." He stared at me for a long moment. "Davis sent me to check if you were still alive. He didn't think you'd last this long." "Tell Davis I'll be here until my transport arrives." Mitchell shook his head. "You're either crazy or too stubborn to admit you're suffering, or I'm more capable than you assumed," I said quietly. He turned and walked back toward the base, glancing back twice as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. I closed my eyes again and returned to my meditation. The night deepened. The temperature continued to drop, and I remained exactly where I was, unmoving, unshaken, waiting for morning and whatever would come next. What the SEALs didn't know was that in a few hours, everything would change. In a few hours, they would learn exactly who they had forced to sleep in the snow, and they would remember this night for the rest of their careers. At midnight, Sergeant Davis stood at the window of the SEAL barracks, staring out at the distant figure sitting motionless in the snow. "She's still there," he said to the others gathered around. Mitchell shook his head. "I went out there 2 hours ago. She's not even shivering, just sitting there like she's meditating at a spa." "Bullshit," another SEAL named Rodriguez said. "Nobody sits still in -20 for 6 hours. She's got to be using some kind of heating equipment." "I checked," Mitchell insisted. "No heaters, no extra gear visible. Just that piece of shit sleeping bag we gave her." Davis frowned. "Then she's faking it, trying to prove something. She'll crack soon." But as the hours continued to pass and the figure in the snow remained perfectly still, doubt began creeping into their minds. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was who I really was. My mind drifted back as I sat in the snow, not to escape the cold, but to put it in context, to remind myself that I had survived far worse. 2 years ago, Hindu Kush Mountains, Afghanistan. I had been leading a 6-person reconnaissance team deep in Taliban territory. Our mission: locate and identify a high-value target operating from a mountain compound. The mission had been going smoothly until the ambush. They had been tracking us for at least a day, waiting for the perfect moment. When we entered a narrow valley with high walls on both sides, they opened fire from above. Lieutenant Morrison, our team leader, died in the first 3 seconds. Headshot. He didn't even have time to call out a warning. Corporal Chen went down next, an RPG explosion that threw him 30 feet into a rock wall. The rest of us scrambled for cover, returning fire, trying to organize a defense against an enemy that had every advantage. Staff Sergeant Williams, our senior NCO, took command. "Fall back, find cover, call for extract." But there was nowhere to fall back to. The valley was a kill box, and we were trapped inside it. I found a position behind a boulder and began returning precision fire with my rifle. As the team's designated marksman, my job was to take out priority targets. I dropped 3 Taliban fighters in the first minute, 5 more in the second minute. But there were too many, at least 20 of them, maybe more, firing from elevated positions we couldn't effectively engage. Specialist Brooks took a round through the chest. He died calling for his mother. Private First Class Martinez lasted longer, bleeding from multiple wounds, still firing back until a second burst caught him in the throat. Then it was just Williams and me. "We're not making it out of this," he said, his voice calm despite the situation. "But we can make them pay for it. I had other plans." "There's a cave system," I said, pointing to an opening I had spotted in the valley wall. "Thermal imagery showed it yesterday. Extensive tunnels. We can use them to escape." Williams looked at the cave entrance. It was 50 meters away, across. Open ground under direct fire. We'll die trying to reach it. We'll die if we stay here. He considered for exactly 2 seconds. Go, I'll cover you. We go together or not at all. He smiled grimly. Stubborn as always, silence. That's why they gave me the call sign. We made our move. Williams laid down suppressing fire while I sprinted toward the cave. Bullets impacted around me, kicking up dirt and stone fragments. I made it to the entrance and immediately turned to provide cover for Williams. He ran and I fired, dropping 2 Taliban fighters who exposed themselves trying to target him. He was 10 meters away when the bullet caught him in the leg. He stumbled, fell, tried to get up. I ran back out into the open, grabbed him under the arms and dragged him into the cave as rounds sparked off the rocks around us. Inside the cave, I assessed his wound. Femoral artery hit, bleeding badly. I applied a tourniquet, but I knew the truth, and so did he. Leave me, Williams said. Take the radio. Get to safety. Call in the strike on the compound. I'm not leaving you. That's an order, Captain. He had discovered my actual rank months earlier, though officially I was just another team member. My real status was classified. With respect, Sergeant, I'm not taking that order. I hoisted him over my shoulders in a fireman's carry and began moving deeper into the cave system, using my night vision to navigate. The Taliban followed. I could hear them behind us shouting, firing into the darkness. I moved through those caves for 3 hours, carrying Williams, stopping periodically to return fire and keep our pursuers at bay. He died after the 2nd hour. Bled out despite everything I did. I kept carrying him anyway. I wasn't going to leave his body for the enemy. Eventually, I reached an exit on the other side of the mountain. The Taliban had given up the pursuit, assuming we had died in the dark tunnels. I was 50 miles from friendly territory, with no communications, minimal supplies, and carrying a dead man. I buried Williams properly, marked the location, took his dog tags, and began walking. For 11 days, I moved through some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. Taliban and local militia controlled the region. Every village was dangerous. Every road was watched. I traveled at night, hid during the day, ate whatever I could find, drank from streams, and kept moving toward friendly lines. The temperature at night dropped below freezing. I had no cold weather gear. My uniform was torn and bloody. I had 2 gunshot wounds I had treated with field dressings and sheer willpower. But I didn't stop, didn't quit, didn't allow myself to consider failure. On the 11th day, I reached a U.S. forward operating base, walked through the gate, and collapsed. I woke up in a field hospital 3 days later. The debrief took a week. What I had done was classified so highly that most of the officers interviewing me didn't have clearance to hear the full story. They wanted to give me a Medal of Honor. I refused. They wanted to give me a Silver Star. I refused that too. Because officially, my team had never been in that valley. The mission had never happened. The 6 Americans who died were victims of a training accident. The truth would remain classified for at least 50 years. So I took no recognition, no medals, no public acknowledgement. All I took was the lesson that I could survive anything, that the human body could endure conditions that seemed impossible if the mind refused to break. That cold, pain, exhaustion, fear, all of it was just information to process and overcome. I opened my eyes, returning to the present. The Alaskan night around me was cold, yes. Uncomfortable, certainly. But it was nothing compared to those mountains in Afghanistan. This was easy. Through the darkness, I could see lights still on in the SEAL barracks. They were still watching, still waiting for me to fail. I checked my watch. 300 hours. In less than 2 hours, everything would change. I closed my eyes again and resumed my meditation, my breathing steady, my heart rate at rest, my body temperature controlled through techniques that most people would never learn. The SEALs thought they were teaching me a lesson about toughness. They had no idea they were about to receive one themselves. At 0430, I heard vehicle engines in the distance, multiple vehicles moving fast. I opened my eyes but didn't move. Through the darkness, I could see headlights approaching the base from the south. 3 vehicles moving in formation. This was early. My transport wasn't scheduled until 0600. The vehicles reached the base perimeter and didn't slow down. They came straight through the gate with authority that suggested they didn't need permission. I stood for the first time in 11 hours, stretching muscles that had been held in position through pure discipline. The vehicles stopped in the center of the compound. Their arrival had triggered every alarm in the base. Lights came on. Personnel began emerging from buildings. I walked toward the base, carrying my sleeping bag and duffel, moving with the steady pace of someone who had just completed a pleasant camping trip rather than spending a night in life-threatening cold. The SEALs were gathered outside their barracks, along with dozens of other personnel, all staring at the vehicles. They were black SUVs, heavily armored with small American flags mounted on the hoods. This wasn't standard military transport. This was something else entirely. The doors opened and 6 men in dark suits emerged, all of them moving with the precise coordination of Secret Service agents. Then the rear door of the center vehicle opened. A 4-star general stepped out. His uniform was immaculate even at this hour. His face showed the weathered experience of someone who had commanded at the highest levels for decades. I recognized him immediately. General Marcus Thompson, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the second most powerful military officer in the United States. He looked around the compound with an expression that suggested he was not pleased to be here. The base commander, Colonel Harrison, came running out of his quarters, still pulling on his uniform jacket. "General Thompson, sir, we weren't notified of your arrival." "This isn't a social visit, Colonel. Where is Captain Elena Vance?" Harrison looked confused. "Captain Vance?" "Sir, I don't have anyone by that name assigned here. We only have transient personnel and training cadre." One of the Secret Service agents pulled out a tablet and showed Harrison a photograph. My photograph. Harrison's confusion deepened. That's the woman who arrived yesterday, but she didn't identify herself as a captain. She had no visible rank. Her orders were all classified above my clearance. "Where is she?" Thompson demanded. I stepped forward from the shadows, still carrying my sleeping bag, my uniform covered in frost. "I'm here, General." Every eye turned to me. Thompson's expression shifted from urgency to shock to fury in the space of 2 seconds. "Captain Vance, why the hell are you standing outside at 0430 in the morning?" Before I could answer, Sergeant Davis stepped forward, his face showing the first signs of understanding that something was terribly wrong. "Sir, I can explain." "You can shut your mouth," Thompson snapped, not even looking at him. I asked Captain Vance a question. I met Thompson's eyes calmly. "I was assigned outdoor accommodations for the night, sir. Character building exercise." Thompson's jaw tightened. "Assigned by whom?" "The training cadre determined that the barracks were full, sir. They felt that sleeping outside in -20-degree weather would be educational." Thompson turned slowly to look at Davis, and the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees from the ice in his expression. "You," he said quietly, his voice more dangerous for its softness, "you put a captain in the United States Army outside in Arctic conditions, with inadequate gear?" Davis had gone pale. "Sir, I didn't know she was a captain. She had no identification visible. She looked like..." "Like what, Sergeant? Like someone you could disrespect because she's a woman?" Davis said nothing, his face showing pure terror. Thompson turned to Harrison. "Colonel, I need a secure conference room immediately. Captain Vance needs to brief the President of the United States in the next 15 minutes on a developing situation in the Middle East. She's the only intelligence officer who has ground-level knowledge of the terrain where we're about to commit forces." "The President?" Harrison stammered. "Sir, I had no idea." "Nobody had any idea," Thompson cut him off. Because Captain Vance's identity and movements are classified at the highest levels. She's traveling under security protocols that even you don't have clearance for, Colonel. He looked at me. Captain, are you mission capable after spending the night in those conditions? I'm fine, General, ready to brief. Of course you are, he muttered, because you're Elena goddamn Vance and nothing stops you. He turned back to the assembled personnel. For your information, Captain Vance holds one of the highest security clearances in the entire U.S. military. She has been personally selected by the President for operations that officially don't exist. And she just spent the last 12 hours sitting in the snow because some SEALs decided she needed to prove herself. The silence was absolute. Thompson wasn't done. Captain Vance has been recommended for the Medal of Honor 3 times. She refused each time because the missions she completed are classified so far above top secret that they can't be publicly acknowledged. She survived 11 days alone in Taliban-controlled territory, carrying a wounded teammate. She has more confirmed kills than anyone currently operating in U.S. Special Forces. And she did all of this while people like you assumed she was weak because she's a woman. He stepped closer to Davis. She's not weak, Sergeant. You are, because you let prejudice and ignorance guide your decisions, and you just humiliated yourself in front of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Davis looked like he might collapse. Thompson gestured to his security detail. Captain Vance, the President is waiting. I nodded and followed him toward the building, leaving behind a compound full of people who were just beginning to understand what they had done. I followed General Thompson into the base headquarters building, the Secret Service agents forming a protective perimeter around us. Behind us, the assembled personnel stood frozen in the pre-dawn cold, processing what they had just witnessed. Colonel Harrison hurried ahead to unlock the secure conference room, his hands shaking slightly as he fumbled with the access codes. Inside, the room was equipped with encrypted communication systems, multiple screens, and security measures that exceeded anything else on the base. Thompson turned to Harrison. Colonel, clear the building. Everyone except Captain Vance and essential communications personnel out. Now. Yes, sir. Harrison grabbed a phone and began issuing orders. One of the Secret Service agents handed me a tablet. Captain Vance, the President is standing by on secure video. Connection will be established in 3 minutes. I took the tablet and sat down at the conference table. Thompson sat across from me, his expression still showing controlled anger. Elena, he said quietly, using my first name now that we were alone. Are you really okay? 12 hours in those conditions. I'm fine, General. I've operated in worse. I know you have. That's not the point. The point is that you shouldn't have had to endure that kind of disrespect on a U.S. military base. With respect, sir, I've endured worse disrespect in hostile territory. This was just ignorance, not malice. That doesn't make it acceptable. No, I agreed, but it makes it teachable. Thompson shook his head with something that might have been admiration. You're more forgiving than I am. If I had my way, Davis and his friends would be scrubbing latrines for the next year. That would be wasteful, General. They're trained operators. Better to educate them than destroy them. We'll see what Colonel Harrison decides. Right now, we have bigger problems. He pulled up a map on the main screen. It showed a region in Syria near the Turkish border. Situation developed overnight. High-value target we've been tracking for 8 months has been located in this compound. Small window for action, maybe 24 hours before he moves again. What's the complication? The compound is in an area you operated in 2 years ago. You spent 3 months embedded with local forces. You know the terrain, the population, the security situation better than anyone else in our intelligence network, and you need my assessment before committing forces. Exactly. JSOC has a strike package ready to go, but the President wants your evaluation first. Is the intelligence solid? Are there civilians at risk? What's the collateral damage assessment? I studied the map, memories flooding back. I had walked those streets, spoken with those villagers, understood the complex tribal dynamics that most analysts missed. The tablet beeped. Secure connection established. The screen flickered and the President of the United States appeared, sitting in what looked like the Situation Room with several advisors visible in the background. "Captain Vance," the President said, "thank you for making yourself available on short notice." "Mr. President," I responded, sitting up straighter, "General Thompson tells me you're the only person who can give us ground truth on this target location. I need your honest assessment. Can we take this shot without creating an international incident or significant civilian casualties?" I pulled up detailed imagery of the compound on my tablet, cross-referencing it with my memories of the area. "Mr. President, this compound is owned by the Al-Masri family. They're civilian merchants, but they've been known to provide safe haven to militants in exchange for protection money. So the target is using them as human shields. Partially. But the family also has genuine commercial operations there. During my time in the area, I observed their patterns. They close their shop and send the women and children to relatives during periods of heightened militant activity. Can we verify if they've evacuated currently?" "I can, sir. Give me 2 minutes." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I had memorized but never expected to use again. It rang 4 times before a male voice answered in Arabic. I responded in the same language, using a code phrase that identified me to the contact. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. When I hung up, I had the information I needed. "Mr. President, I just spoke with a local contact. The Al-Masri family evacuated their compound 2 days ago. The women and children are with relatives in Turkey. Only adult males associated with militant activities remain in the compound." The President leaned forward. "How reliable is your source?" "I trust him with my life, sir. I did exactly that on multiple occasions 2 years ago." General Thompson added context. "Mr. President, Captain Vance's network of local contacts is unparalleled. If she says the source is reliable, it is." The President consulted with someone off-screen, then looked back at the camera. "Captain, what's your recommendation? Do we take the shot?" I considered carefully. Lives hung on my answer. Both American forces who would conduct the operation and any civilians who might be caught in the crossfire. "Sir, based on current intelligence and local ground truth, this is the cleanest shot we're going to get. The target is isolated with minimal security force. Civilian presence is near zero. Collateral damage can be minimized with precision weapons." I paused. "But I recommend a ground operation rather than an air strike. The compound has underground structures that won't show on thermal imaging. If we want confirmation of target elimination, we need eyes on the objective. How soon can a ground team be ready?" "JSOC can have Delta operators in position within 6 hours, sir." The President nodded slowly. "Make it happen. Captain Vance, thank you for your assessment. General Thompson, coordinate with JSOC. I want this executed within 12 hours. Yes, Mr. President. And Captain Vance? One more thing." "Yes, sir." "General Thompson briefed me on what happened when you arrived at that base, the way you were treated. That's unacceptable. I want a full investigation. With respect, Mr. President, I'd rather turn it into a teaching moment than a witch hunt." The President smiled slightly. "General Thompson said you'd say that. Fine. But those SEALs are going to learn a very public lesson about respect and assumptions. Understood?" "Understood, sir." The screen went dark. The briefing was over. Thompson stood and stretched. "Well done, Elena. Clean assessment, clear recommendation. That's why we keep pulling you back in. I thought I was on vacation, General. You were. Until the world decided it needed you again." He walked to the door, then turned back. "Take a few hours to rest. Proper rest, in an actual bed. Then we'll get you on transport to your next assignment. What about the situation here, with Davis and the others? That's being handled. Colonel Harrison is drafting a response as we speak." As if summoned by his name, Harrison entered the room with a folder. "General Captain, I've completed my initial assessment of last night's incident. Thompson gestured for him to continue. Harrison opened the folder. Sergeant Davis and his team violated multiple regulations regarding treatment of transient personnel, failed to verify status of arriving personnel, and demonstrated conduct unbecoming of SEAL operators. I'm recommending formal counseling, mandatory respect and inclusion training, and temporary removal from operational status pending completion of remedial education. Thompson looked at me. Captain Vance, does that sound appropriate to you? I considered the 3 SEALs who had forced me to sleep outside. Young, arrogant, operating on assumptions rather than facts. It sounds appropriate, Colonel. But I'd like to add one requirement. What's that? I want them to spend time with female operators in various specialties. Combat pilots, EOD technicians, intelligence officers. Let them see firsthand what women contribute to military operations. Harrison nodded. I can arrange that. They'll spend the next month rotating through different units, working directly with and learning from female service members. Thompson added his own requirement, and they'll write a formal after-action report on what they learned, not as punishment, but as education. I want to see evidence of actual growth and understanding. Yes, sir, Harrison said. Where are they now? I asked. Confined to barracks pending this decision, Harrison replied. They've been quite subdued since your identity was revealed. I'd like to speak with them, I said, before I leave. Both Thompson and Harrison looked surprised. Captain, you don't owe them anything, Thompson said. I'm not doing it for them, General. I'm doing it because if I don't address this directly, they'll spend their careers wondering what they could have said or done differently. Better to close the loop now. Harrison checked his watch. I can have them in a conference room in 15 minutes. Make it happen, Thompson said. But Captain, you're under no obligation to be gentle with them. I wasn't planning to be, General. 15 minutes later, I sat in a small conference room as Davis, Mitchell, and Rodriguez were escorted in by an MP. They looked like they hadn't slept, their faces showing a mixture of shame, fear, and exhaustion. They came to attention when they saw me. At ease, I said. Sit down. They sat, unable to meet my eyes. I'm going to make this brief, I began. What you did last night was wrong, not because you made me uncomfortable, but because you made decisions based on assumptions rather than facts. Davis finally looked up. Ma'am, we had no idea who you were. If you had known, you would have treated me with respect, I finished. But that's exactly the problem. Respect shouldn't require knowing someone's rank or accomplishments. It should be the default setting. You're right, ma'am, Mitchell said quietly. We were wrong, Rodriguez added. Ma'am, we've spent all night learning about your operational history, what you've done, what you've survived. We're ashamed that we treated you the way we did. Good, I said flatly. Shame is a useful emotion if it drives change. So here's what's going to happen. They tensed. You're going to complete the training program Colonel Harrison outlined. You're going to work with female operators and learn from them. You're going to write reports demonstrating that you've actually internalized these lessons. And you're going to become advocates for respect and inclusion in the special operations community. They nodded. But more importantly, I continued, you're going to remember last night. Remember how you felt when you realized you had disrespected someone you should have honored. And you're going to use that memory every time you're tempted to judge someone by appearance rather than capability. Yes, ma'am, they said in unison. I stood, and they immediately stood with me. You're all capable operators. You've completed training that most people can't even attempt. Don't waste that potential by letting prejudice and assumptions compromise your judgment. Be better than you were yesterday. We will be, ma'am, Davis said. I promise you that. Good. Because the next woman you encounter might not be as forgiving as I am. I walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. The fact that I spent 12 hours in the snow without breaking, that wasn't superhuman. That was just training and mental discipline. Any of you could do the same if you learned the techniques. Stop assuming physical limits based on gender and start recognizing that capability is about mind more than muscle. Rodriguez spoke up. "Ma'am, could you teach us? Those techniques?" "Not me, but there are resources available. Seek them out, learn them, become more capable than you currently are." I left the room, leaving them to process the conversation. Thompson was waiting in the hallway. "Feel better?" "Actually, yes. They needed to hear it directly from me. Now they can move forward without wondering." "You're a better person than most, Elena. I'm just practical, General. The military invested resources in training those men. Better to fix them than discard them." Thompson walked me to the VIP quarters where I could finally rest in an actual bed. "You have 6 hours before your transport leaves. Get some sleep. You've earned it." "Thank you, General." As I lay down on the bed, finally warm for the first time in 12 hours, I thought about the past 24 hours. I had been disrespected, forced to endure unnecessary hardship, and treated as less than human by people who should have known better. But I had also taught a lesson that might ripple through the special operations community for years. That capability cannot be judged by appearance. That respect should be universal. That assumptions are dangerous. And that the quiet woman sleeping in the snow might be the most dangerous person on the entire base. I closed my eyes and slept. 6 hours later, I woke to a knock on the door. I had slept deeply, the kind of rest that comes after extreme physical stress, followed by complete safety. "Captain Vance," a voice called. "Your transport is ready in 30 minutes. I showered, dressed in fresh utilities, and packed my gear. When I stepped outside, Colonel Harrison was waiting with a staff car. "Captain, I wanted to personally apologize for what happened under my command. Colonel, I appreciate it. Just make sure future personnel are treated better." "I will, ma'am. I've already implemented new protocols." As we drove toward the airfield, I noticed Davis, Mitchell, and Rodriguez running a training evolution, taking orders from a female Marine Corps captain who was clearly putting them through their paces. "That's Captain Sarah Chen," Harrison said, "Marine Corps Force Recon. I asked her to take charge of their remedial training. Good choice." At the airfield, General Thompson stood near a waiting C-130. "Captain, ready for your next assignment?" "As ready as I ever am." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Your orders. You're heading somewhere even more remote than Alaska, and considerably more dangerous." "Sounds about right. Elena, what happened here is becoming a story. Maybe the community needs to hear it, needs to understand that assumptions about women in combat are fundamentally flawed. If it changes minds, then it was worth 12 hours of discomfort." I was turning toward the aircraft when Davis, Mitchell, and Rodriguez ran across the tarmac with Captain Chen following. They stopped at attention. "Captain Vance," Davis said, breathing hard, "we wanted to speak before you left, about the techniques that allowed you to endure last night. Where do we start?" "Start with SEER School Refresher. Focus on mental conditioning. Learn meditation, cold conditioning protocols. And stop thinking about toughness as purely physical. The strongest warriors control their minds under pressure." "We will, ma'am." Captain Chen stepped forward. "Captain Vance, thank you for what you did here. You taught a lesson I've been trying to teach for years. Keep teaching them. They have potential." General Thompson checked his watch. "Captain Vance, wheels up in 5 minutes." I turned to them one last time. What happened here isn't about me. It's about a principle. Every person deserves respect until they prove otherwise. Only capability and character matter. Remember that. "Yes, ma'am." I walked up the ramp. As the C-130 taxied, my phone buzzed with a message from Davis. "Captain Vance, what happened last night will be the defining moment of my career. Not because of shame, but because of the lesson. I will make sure no one else makes my mistake. Thank you for giving me the chance to be better." I typed back, "Learn from it, teach others. That's how we improve." 3 weeks later, deep in a classified operation, I received an email from Colonel Harrison. Captain Vance, the incident has become a case study we teach all incoming personnel. Davis, Mitchell, and Rodriguez completed remedial training with exceptional marks and requested to become instructors in our Respect program. The culture here has changed. You spent one night in the snow and changed an entire base. I filed the email away. This was why I served. Because sometimes one person refusing to break could change minds and save lives. 2 months later, I spoke at a joint special operations conference on resilience and mental conditioning. 400 operators from every branch attended. I walked them through breathing exercises, meditation practices, mental frameworks for managing pain. The audience took notes, asked intelligent questions. At the end, I saw Davis, Mitchell, and Rodriguez at the back with Captain Chen. "Ma'am," Davis said afterward, "we've been assigned to develop a training module based on your techniques and the Alaska lessons. We're calling it the Silence Protocol. Use it, but make it about principles, not about me personally." Captain Chen added quietly, "What you did mattered, ma'am. Female operators across all services are being treated with more respect. Your story gave us leverage." "Good. That makes 12 hours worth it." General Thompson texted, "Excellent presentation. Consider a permanent instructor position." I replied, "Respectfully decline. I'm a field operator, not a teacher." His response, "You're both, whether you accept it or not. Stay safe." 6 months after Alaska, in hostile territory I cannot name, I found myself pinned down in freezing conditions, waiting for extraction. As I controlled my breathing, managed my body temperature through mental discipline, I thought about that night in Alaska. The SEALs had tried to break me. Instead, they'd reminded me of my capabilities and given me a story teaching the next generation. The extraction team arrived. Mission completed. And somewhere, operators were learning the Silence Protocol, learning that mental strength matters more than physical power, learning that respect should be universal. I had spent 12 hours in the snow and changed more than I realized. Not bad for a night's work.